Welcome. I'm Judy Jordan, the director of the Jean Baker Miller Training Institute, and I am so happy to welcome all of you. Apparently there's still people coming, and there's a bit of a parking and driving clog out on the roads, but we're going to go ahead and get started. This is the fourth Jean Baker Miller Memorial Lecture, and we are so happy to have Lyn Mikel Brown here today. Jean was an extraordinary woman. She was a friend, a mentor, a therapist, a mother, and most importantly, she was a visionary. Where others saw women's deficits and weaknesses, she saw their strengths. Where others saw limitation, she saw possibility. She listened carefully to women, and she honored their realities. She was dedicated to correcting errors in existing theory and practice regarding women, and she had a profound sense of the urgency of working for social justice. Her straightforward analysis of the distorting forces of power over dynamics still stands out in the world of psychological theories. Others simply overlook this most crucial of shaping forces in people's lives. Jean wrote about the importance of anger in women's lives, how good conflict is necessary if relationships are to be healthy and growth-enhancing. She saw anger as an important signal that things are not right on an individual or a collective level. She did not support aggression or dominance as responses, but anger she respected, just as our speaker tonight does. Lyn Mikel Brown is another visionary. Her work on girls is acclaimed for exploring new and essential territory: social context, class, race, the impact of media manipulation. Daughters magazine noted, when it comes to girls' issues, there aren't many people more expert than Lyn Mikel Brown. She began her work with Carol Gilligan at Harvard, where she was a founding member of the Harvard Project on Women's Psychology and Girls' Development. The book she wrote with Carol, Meeting at the Crossroads, was called Revolutionary by the New York Times. She was also the co-creator of the nonprofit Hardy Girls, Healthy Women, and in her book Girlfighting, she suggests we must look at the social environment as well as the individual if we seek to change a pattern of girls' anger and their so-called meanness. She has been a voice speaking, as Jean Baker Miller did, for an understanding of the real strengths and vulnerabilities of girls. As you can imagine, Lyn has received many distinguished awards and honors, and they keep rolling in. Officially, Lyn is a professor of education and human development at Colby College. She writes extensively on the relational life of girls. She is raising a strong and hardy daughter, Maya, who is a feminist, and she continues to inspire hope in those of us who care deeply about the future for girls and women in this culture. So I'm delighted to present to you Lyn Mikel Brown. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'm good. Thank you so much for that incredible introduction. I have to live up to this now. I want to just sort of begin a little bit with some history and talking about the first time I met Jean Baker Miller was when I think this was a historic moment. I didn't know it at the time. I just felt like I was incredibly lucky as a graduate student. But on the 7th floor of Larson at the Ed School at Harvard, where I was working with Carol Gilligan and Sherry Langdale, where are you? Did you? Oh my gosh, I'm seeing people that I haven't seen in so long. But we had this opportunity to meet with the Women's Ways of Knowing Collective and the Stone Center Collective and the Harvard Project Collective. And it was, you know, in this windowless room, you know, sitting around, as Larson is, there's no windows. But, you know, just sitting around talking about how it was that we could sort of change psychology. And I don't think it ever happened again. And so I count myself as incredibly lucky. I think it was 1986 or at some point. So I just want to read a little bit about sort of my own experience of Jean's work and talk a little bit about girl and fighting as both as contested terms and historical terms. And then I'm going to talk about media and the way that it's sort of targeting girls in a particular way, and end with what I think is a real moment here to embrace and to celebrate, which is I think we're at a time when fighting like a girl is really a positive, wonderful thing, and is really taking off. I see very hopeful at this moment working with young women. So I want to talk about that activist work. So that's the trajectory. But I just want to say it was clear to me, even in 1986 during that conversation, how Jean's theoretical and clinical writings were fundamental to our work at the Harvard Project. Particularly our understanding of girls' psychological and political resistance, which is what we really were focusing on. Her understanding that subordination and authenticity are incompatible, that voice is not just about individual power, but fundamental to social justice, that anger is a resource for global change, the essential political emotion. It rocked my world then, and it continues to rock my world. I'm indebted to her insights, and I spend my time now trying to put this work into practice that is both derived from the Harvard Project and from the Stone Center work. It's still a constant source of frustration for me that people conflate Jean's and Carol Gilligan's notion of relationship only with the interpersonal and reduce their understanding of voice to self-esteem only. Because for all of us working with them, the personal was so clearly the political, and the relational was directly connected to the struggle at the heart of collective resistance to wider oppressions and inequalities. It was, I think, their conversations and work together, Carol and Jean's, that helped us understand that our authentic engagement with the world demanded interrogation of structural sexism and required the courage of voice as a form of political activism. It's this political piece that nearly all of us at the Harvard Project embraced and developed in our life's work. And I'm talking about Janie Victoria Ward's outlines of a resistance for liberation, rather than the individual short-term coping strategies of mere survival. Mark Tappan's exploration of internalized oppression and his challenge to male privilege. Deborah Tolman's research on the impact of compulsory heterosexuality on desire and embodiment. Niobe Wei's ecological approach to adolescence and her exploration of the emotional lives of boys, and my own work on the political power of girls' justified anger and efforts to scaffold their social justice work. All of us are engaged in transformative practice, and we can trace this passion to our teachers and muses gathered in the room on the 7th floor of Larson that day. So this evening I want to talk with you about my work, which is increasingly about girls' activism. My partner up here, Mark Tappan, who's a psychologist and also at Colby, writes that the key aspects of internalized oppression, self-deprecation, that is taking anger and frustration out on oneself, and horizontal violence, taking it out on people like oneself, are not immutable or permanent psychological qualities. They are the result of becoming skilled at, making our own, and unwittingly passing on through our relationships those negative and oppressive stories, images, and voices we've experienced in our daily lives. We can interrupt this process by using the same cultural means. This is at the heart of what we're doing at my nonprofit at Hardy Girls. It's the heart of what I know so many of you in the room are doing, and I really celebrate that work. And what we're doing essentially is unveiling the world of oppression in ways that enable girls to challenge and critique the status quo, to move toward authenticity as Jean understood it, as a means to freedom, liberation, and power. And so with that, I want to sort of, as that framework, talk a little bit about girlhood and the history of girlhood, because as I said, I think it's a contested term, and it changes over time. What does it mean to be a girl? Certainly when I was doing the work in the sort of late 80s and mid 90s, when we were really beginning to